Hello, everyone. Welcome to xMatters Demo Days. Thank you for joining us. As a customer success manager at xMatters, I have the pleasure of working with great customers such as WEX. Today, you'll hear about how they're achieving success with xMatters. We have the chat area open, as many people found. You can post your questions or comments throughout today's webinar. This session is intended for current or prospective xMatters customers. It is subject to all published fair use policies and other terms and conditions. If you'd like more information, you can find it at xmatters.com/policy. I'm your host, Zoe Na, and joining me is Will Derksen. Will is a product advocate on the sales engineering team at xMatters, working with enterprise customers on implementations that scale seamlessly. Coming from a background in security operations, Will is involved in the design and deployment of practical solutions to relieve pain points felt throughout the software deployment pipeline. Will is passionate about empowering people with tools to automate the boring stuff and change the way they approach projects to yield better results. From the WEX team, I'm excited to introduce John and JT. WEX is a growing financial technology solutions provider that serves millions of companies worldwide with more than 4,900 associates in 11 countries. They simplify complex payment systems and deliver insights that help their customers make smart, data-driven business decisions. John and JT's team has the responsibility for ensuring availability for multiple platforms and infrastructure across several hybrid data centers with key focus on speed of transaction for their customers. John, welcome and thank you for joining us today. You can take yourself off mute.
Hi, thanks everyone.
So to start us off, could you tell us a little bit more about how you were handling incident management before xMatters?
Yeah, so prior to xMatters, it was, we had boots on the ground in the physical data center, and it was sort of your typical monitor via email situation. There was maybe a dashboard or something that the data center would look at, but when something went wrong, with an alert, it would send an email to the data center, and then they would go through the process of trying to determine who was responsible for remediating that alert and opening a Sharewell ticket. And then they would begin, the manual process to see if they needed to engage other people, and creating the ticket. So it was a very manual process.
It sounds like there were a number of manual steps involved. What were the challenges with that?
Yeah, so it was all the normal challenges you would associate with sort of monitoring via email, right? There were missed notifications. There was notifications that were sent to an inbox that were missed, amidst the thousands of other emails that were being sent. There was always the challenge of determining who was on call, right? Determining if the recipients were on call today or what their phone numbers were or how to reach them. And there was different requirements around monitoring. So as we kind of grew by acquisition, right, some monitors were no longer appropriate in all circumstances. And the volume of alerts meant that it was difficult to ensure incident tickets were recorded accurately and on time. And in the long run, we became much more reactive rather than proactive around incidents, and we decided we needed a major change.
Yeah, so before we dive into how your team addressed these challenges, you mentioned monitoring systems. Many of our audience members today will likely be in a similar situation and trying to better handle their alerting. I know from working with your team that you work with a wide range of products on the monitoring side. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so in our growth through acquisition, we had a lot of legacy monitoring tools, right? We had tools like Nimsoft, or we might be getting alerts from AWS, or somewhere else in the cloud, or Commvault, or Datadog, or AppD. Various teams had used all these other tools. So the challenge became, all these tools have different payloads on the backside. And how do we make sure that as a team, we achieve our goals of making sure that the appropriate teams are alerted in the quickest possible manner, right? So we really focused on Datadog and their use of monitoring and their use of tags to kind of solve this problem. Datadog works best when things are tagged appropriately. So we decided to leverage the xMatters subscription model and the Datadog tags in order to route alerts.
Mm-hmm. With Datadog and all the other products you just mentioned, I can see that feeding data to your ticketing platform could be challenging. What was the main reason you chose xMatters?
Well, primarily, a lot of it was around the ease of use and the ease of implementation of xMatters. We use xMatters to handle the on-call notifications, so the data center no longer had to look up to see who was on call, right? That was all handled by xMatters. And it became easy for us to onboard new teams, right? As new teams, came on board, or as new acquisitions, new companies came on board, being able to reach out and quickly implement a monitoring solution for them became very important. So we hooked up all these various tools to xMatters, right? CloudWatch, Datadog, AppD. And with components like the event flood control and flow designer, we could not only reduce the flood of those tickets, but we could also route alerts better. Our DevOps team, like our data lake team, could be alerted directly. There was no need for the data center to look up who to reach out to and who to notify. So they could get alerts alongside the DC without the data center needed to manually log a ticket or manually call people out. So, the ease of use of xMatters was really key in that.
It's great that you're able to apply different methodologies using Flow Designer. Shortly, we'll be seeing some of those examples in the demo, but I'm glad you brought up Flow Designer because your team were early adopters.
Yeah, so we were very early adopters from xMatters, and we actually were adopting xMatters prior to Flow Designer. I remember back in the day when we had just a script editor, but Flow Designer was one of the earliest things we implemented, and it made a huge difference in how we do things and the speed at which we can onboard teams. One of the biggest gaps we identified early on was we need to script all of our potential integrations, right? The payload coming in from Datadog was different than the payload from AppD, and Flow Designer filled that gap very nicely. We didn't need to be experts in JavaScript or experts in JSON to wire all these different monitoring platforms up. Flow Designer took care of a lot of that. Anyone could build a drag and drop workflow in Flow Designer with little to no scripting involved. We are also on the WEX side really interested in the incident management functionality that you guys rolled out here recently. And we really identified that early on as a key feature in our workflow. So we're shifting the ticket creation responsibility from the data center to the teams who are getting the alert, right? So our implementation is when we get an alert, when xMatters sends an alert, we have a button to create the incident, and that triggers the incident creation in xMatters where teams can collaborate and join together and work together. And we're waiting for some additional functionality to really close everything and make it a tight integration, but we've really been impressed so far with how many of our pain points the incident management feature in xMatters has helped, particularly around the post-incident report in the incident management functionality.
That's great. For our audience, if you've not seen our adaptive incident management console that John just mentioned, be sure to check out our previous demo days video on our YouTube channel for a deeper look into the features. It's been great hearing about WEX's journey so far, so we'll dive into some of the other benefits and next steps. Will and JT, could you take us through some of the xMatters features that WEX team has been working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Zoe. John has told us about some of their key integrations with Datadog and Sharewell, and also how xMatters has helped kind of automate that triage process for WEX. But what I want to do is actually jump into the tool so we can actually see, some of those key components that enable this functionality for them. So here we are in Flow Designer, and this is xMatters drag and drop codeless workflow builder that John had mentioned. So, to start with, we'll take a look at this trigger. This is actually the inbound signal that's coming in from Datadog. And if we open this up, you can kind of see the depth of information that we're gathering from these alert notifications. And what that really enables us to do then is pass that along through the workflow. And then we're enriching all of these other steps with that same data. Moving on to the next switch statement here, you can see we're validating the tags that are coming from Datadog. And then from there, we're then pushing this through to validate the different types of alerts. So, thinking about the logic here, what is this enabling us to do? It's enabling us to take that signal that's coming in, that alert that's coming in, and then we're able to push that data through and then route this based on what is actually in the data. After that, the next big thing that we're looking at here is the notify on-call resource step. And then that is, allowing us to then reach out to the on-call resource for that team and push that data into their inbox. So they're actually getting that notification with all of that enriched data, what's going on, where does that actually come from, et cetera. JT, many of our customers will be familiar with things like subscriptions to notify on-call teams or stakeholders of specific events. You're especially proud of how you've implemented tags alongside those subscriptions. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, certainly. We have some 800 monitors in Datadog alone, so setting up 800 separate subscriptions just didn't seem like the best idea. We've leveraged tagging in Datadog, which allows us to create subscriptions based on those tag combinations. We've enforced tagging as a requirement, so as long as tags are accurately set in Datadog, teams can then be self-serving and subscribing to relevant alerts for their teams.
Very nice. So, from there, your team can actually triage the alert and decide what action to take next. And that's, the next step within Flow Designer is how those responses that the teams are receiving when they get paged enable them to do things, just kicking off different workflows then. So we can accept it, we can reject this alert, but the big thing here is we can actually create a ticket, and then that will all automatically create in Sharewell and in xMatters, and then they're connected at the same time, enriching them with both of the same data. So from there, when this incident is actually created, we're going to jump into our incident management console to actually look at that. So, for WEX, the ability to have that collaboration option in Google is a huge deal for them. So, this is another big piece where you can add any other number of collaboration tools. And just like any other incident tool, we have, all of our information here, incident number, description, all of our resolvers that have been added to this incident, as well as the teams that they actually represent. And then all of our stakeholders that we're notifying throughout this process as things are progressing. And also another big piece here is this detailed timeline that is being updated dynamically as things are happening. So to kind of show what I mean here, we'll go ahead and resolve this incident. You can see we have that notify stakeholders box there, so we can actually push that through. But this is another one of my favorite pieces, is we actually get to see some of those key metrics. So our time to detect, our time to acknowledge, impact duration, time to resolve, and then our durations by status and severity. That's huge for me. So another thing that JT touched on was subscriptions, and how xMatters actually allows users to do that is we can actually subscribe and make our own subscriptions here. And in this case, we're looking at a Datadog subscription that I've created. And what we're doing is we're actually sorting these by and flagging them by the tags that are coming in for a prod environment. So what we've seen today is kind of a quick look at some of those core features of xMatters that help organizations like WEX actually automate their processes. Zoe, let's turn it back over to you to wrap up some of the other benefits that WEX has realized with xMatters.
Thanks, Will. That was a good tour of the functionalities that's helped the WEX team. So JT, it's clear that there's been some improvement for your teams. Have you found that your metrics improved since implementing xMatters?
Well, so as we mentioned before, we have a lot of tech infrastructure, so the monitoring needs vary, and they weren't always a key focus. But we do have a number of goals we're working towards, such as comparing transaction authorization speed versus last year, or alerting on differences using Datadog and xMatters in order to proactively identify potential issues, before they snowball into a major incident.
That's a great step in your transformation journey. I agree that organizations are finding monitoring crucial to reducing incidents. What else have you found using xMatters?
Well, interesting. It's the appetite other teams have to use the platform. As we introduce xMatters, it's almost like we're internal salespeople. Everybody seems to like what we've shown them. Flow Designer in particular has made it easy to repeat and onboard teams. One such team was implemented in a 2-hour call. They had some custom JSON, and we used Flow Designer to hook up their ticket creation and collaboration steps. Examples like that are making it easier to recruit people and deliver better service experiences.
Awesome. We hope you continue to have that success. Last question from me before we summarize the session. John, what's next in the xMatters journey for WEX?
Sorry, I got a big flashing I'm on mute. Sorry about that. So as we already mentioned, there's some enhancements to the incident management console that we're waiting on xMatters. And I think once we get that last sort of incident trigger, right, we have this unified approach of putting these metrics back into Datadog for consumption. So we can have a Datadog dashboard that shows, how many incidents were open, how many were resolved to, who's working on it, right? What is the severity of these? And it's sort of a single pane of glass for our data center and for all our business associates. And we're also looking at how we can automate tag enforcement within Datadog. So if someone fat fingers a tag or something, how we can alert and notify on that. So just kind of growing the entire suite of products, and bringing everything together.
Exciting stuff. I look forward to continuing our conversation, helping you and the team realize that success. As we bring this session to a close, let's recap on some of the benefits that WEX have realized with xMatters. A reduction in triage and incident call-out response to monitoring, ease of onboarding new teams through standardized processes mapped in Flow Designer, and autonomy for teams to self-serve their notification requirements. All of these achieved with functionality available as a standard across all tiers of the xMatters platform. Now let's take some questions from the audience. Okay, first question. What was the hardest part of getting started with xMatters?
So for me, I think the hardest part was when we started, it was absent the Flow Designer. So we sort of had to become technical experts in a lot of JavaScript and parsing XML and various payloads. And so the learning curve there was a little more steep, right? Now that we have the Flow Designer, that learning curve is greatly reduced. But for us, at least, the hardest part was getting started with the JavaScript. And then on the Datadog side, the hardest part has been agreeing on a standard set of tags to alert by.
Yeah, it's great to know that even the most experienced users love using Flow Designer, and it's very easy to use. Audience members, feel free to ask about general Flow Designer questions or something specific from the demo we just saw earlier. Okay, next question. Does it take much time administrating xMatters platform?
Honestly, not terribly. The biggest, like what John said, the biggest thing is setting up new teams, and even that with the Flow Designer is not terribly difficult. Most of our administration, when we set up a new team, we tend to meet daily for a couple weeks to make sure that all of their alerts have been going to the right people, their on-call is set up correctly. And once those couple weeks have passed and the teams are satisfied with the configuration, there's really not much that we need to handle on an administration level in xMatters.
That's great to hear. Audience members, we're still taking questions either on the chat or the QA. Okay, last question for today's session. What was an unexpected challenge integrating with Datadog?
Yeah, so the biggest unexpected challenge was around tags. So we don't log into the infrastructure itself. So we rapidly noticed that one team, when they implement their Datadog tagging, would use the tag environment PRD to indicate production. and another team would use the tag env production, right? And then another team would use environment as a word followed by PRD. So different tags meaning different things, right? So kind of coming to a consensus about what is a production level alert, or what is this line of business, right? If a team wants to get notified on a certain application, what encompasses all of that application? And it's specifically a little more difficult in a cloud world, where before you had a physical server and you could say, well, this server is now associated with this piece or this application. In a cloud world, that's a little more difficult.
Yeah. Last chance for any questions, any more questions in the audience. If there's no more questions, I'd like to thank John and JT for taking the time to answer all the questions. Just lastly, if you wanted to learn more, you can sign up today with xMatters free, or you can go to xmatters.com/demo to request a free personal demo from our experts. If you found this webinar interesting, we have more information. We have more webinars scheduled every month. Sign up on our Demo Days webpage. You can also track us down online, follow on your channel of choice, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, where we share even more content and would love to connect with you. Thank you, Will, for guiding us through the demo of xMatters, and extra special thank you to John and JT of WEX for sharing your journey with us today. Thanks, John and JT. To our guests, thank you for joining us. This concludes today's Demo Days event. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.